Hi, this is Visitor Spoke, and I'm Maya, your host and a journalist from Finland. In this program, we're going to be meeting with diplomats and foreigners who live here in Pakistan, and we're going to find out what they really think about the country. So let's go. So today, we're going to be meeting with the ambassador of the European Union to Pakistan, Jean-François Cotin, and we've reached his office, so let's go meet with them. Hello.
Welcome to the European Union.
Thank you so much.
Please, have a seat.
Thank you. So, how long have you been here in Islamabad now?
In Islamabad, this time almost 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, almost 4 years.
And how do you like it?
Quite well, yeah.
Yeah?
But I think probably not only Islamabad, but Pakistan
Yeah.
as a country. Yeah. I mean, Islamabad is Pakistan, but only to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's like a bubble.
Yes, a little bit, yes.
Okay. So for the people who might wonder, who don't know that much about the EU and the work it does here in Pakistan, what issues do you focus on here?
Actually, we have a very comprehensive relationship between Pakistan and the European Union, which is back decades now.
Yeah.
And we have different legs in our relationship. One of them is more on political issue, another one is more on trade, another one is more on cooperation assistance.
Okay.
So what we are doing, for example, in Pakistan is we are providing to Pakistan a trade facility.
Okay.
Meaning that anything which is produced here in Pakistan can be exported to the European Union with no duty and no quota. So it gives to Pakistan producers, industrialists or farmers, whoever, it gives them an advantage, comparative advantage, compared to other countries which are exporting also to the EU, but who have to pay taxes when they enter the EU market, or who have also some quotas.
Wow.
So it's something that we have given to Pakistan, which is given by the peoples of Europe to the Pakistani people, to help Pakistan in developing its own industry.
Great.
So it's a big advantage, and it costs a lot of money to the EU because it costs us in non-collected taxes. It costs us between 250 million to 300 million euro every year. So it's a big advantage we give to Pakistan.
Is this like a new thing that the EU is doing?
We have granted Pakistan this facility which is called GSP Plus,
All right.
2014, so it's up to 2023.
All right, great.
And Pakistan has been very good in using it, in exporting more and more textile, more and more leather products, surgical instruments. I mean, what I'm expecting, what I don't really see yet, but I've been working for the last 4 years on that on Pakistan, is also that Pakistan takes this opportunity to explore new avenues in terms of exports.
All right.
Because it's a new, for them, as I said, it gives them an advantage compared to other countries. So it's also an opportunity for them to explore, to test, other productions that they could send to the European Union.
So I noticed that you have a lot of development aid projects here as well. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
What we are trying to do is really to focus also on the priorities of the government itself.
Yeah.
And we are very pleased to say, for example, with the new administration, the new government now for the last 9 months, we see that our priorities are fitting very well with their priorities. We are very much involved in skills development, in education, primary education, in technical and vocational training. We are involved in community mobilization in rural Sindh, in rural areas also in KP. So looking at the poorest segment of the society to see how we can support them in uplifting their living conditions. And another one is a package where we are working more on issue of governance with the government of Pakistan, such as public finance in management, issue of democracy, a number of issues like that.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to work in Pakistan on cooperation assistance. It's also not always easy because you have the federal level and the provincial level.
Yeah.
And then, you have to find the right level, the right interlocutors to see how you can push your program and implement the program. But it's very interesting and rewarding. I mean, when I look, for example, one sector where we are very much involved, which is technical and vocational training.
Yeah.
We are doing that also with one of our member states, Germany, and a European country, which is a non-EU country, which is Norway.
Yeah.
We are working very closely with the apex body for technical vocational training, which is called NAFTTC. And we have seen how our program has helped actually NAFTTC and the different bodies at provincial level in improving the skills of the people who are receiving these trainings. Because Pakistan is in the dire need of skilled laborers.
Yeah.
The industry is growing, but also the problem is quite often industry does not find the right skills which is produced by these different technical and vocational training institutes. So the whole reform program, which is now led by the NAFTTC, is really to make sure that you have a good match between what the skills which are provided to these young people and the needs of the market.
So could you give me an example of like a skills training program that you've implemented here?
I mean, I have two examples in mind, and both of them actually are involving women.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I think it's also important to make sure that these programs and these technical vocational trainings programs are accessible to women.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important to make sure that in Pakistan you have also the labor force should be also probably more gender balanced and to have more and more women participating into the economy of Pakistan. One of them is a program that we were funding in KP, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, where the women have been trained in building solar panels.
Oh, wow.
And then after repairing them as well. So they have a small workshop where they now produce solar panels, but also people can bring their solar panels having an issue or problem, and then they can fix them. So that is a quite interesting one. Another one that I visited recently in Sindh province was the one which actually is training women to become paravets. So kind of, health worker for animals.
Yeah. Like cows and buffaloes.
Cows, buffaloes, donkeys, camels.
Wow.
And that also, I visited it, and especially for me, it was of great interest because my first training, I'm a vet.
Oh, really?
So I'm quite used to this kind of animal husbandry, animal health, something like that. So I wanted to see by my own eyes, how the program was performing, and how these people had been well trained on these specific skills to become paravets. Yeah. And I was very, very pleased to discuss with the women and to listen to them. And clearly, they had been well trained, yes, there was no doubt. And that, gives them the possibility now in their village, around their village, to go around and to have their own customers, and so to help them in maintaining their livestock, and they get paid for that. They sell medicines, and for them it's a good source of income. Actually.
Yeah, and has it been easy to convince the families to agree to get the women in the family trained in this?
It's interesting because we have seen that also in another program we have in Sindh, is that as soon as there is an element of an economic benefit that the family can get by the woman working or doing an activity, then you see that some of the traditional or social barriers are fading away to a certain extent. Not totally, but you can see there are more room for this kind of activities, yes. Because these women are going to bring, some incomes to the family.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So aside from these things that you already mentioned, you also organize cultural events in Pakistan, is that correct?
We don't really organize as such, but we are partners into some events. There are different. I mean, some of them can be also labeled as culturals, but I mean, we are very much involved in Pakistan, and we have been trying to promote in Pakistan movies.
Okay.
So we have one festival that we are supporting, which is a Women's International Film Festival. And we do, I mean, it's organized by a women's organization, which is doing that, which is giving the opportunity for young filmmakers, women filmmakers, to produce films. And then there is a competition, there are prizes, and that is always done around the 8th of March, which is an International Day for women. So that is a Women's International Film Festival. The other one that we are really organizing ourselves is the Human Rights Film Festival. And we are doing that with the UN and with a number of our member states here present in Pakistan. And we do it around the International Day of Human Rights. And last year we were very pleased because we always also organize panels. And we had the Minister for Human Rights, Shireen Mazari, came to one of the panels to discuss the issue of human rights. And what it's important for us is really to show that, you know, issue of human rights is something that you can face in any country around the world.
Yeah.
So we have movies coming from America, we have movies coming from South Asia, we have movies coming from the EU as well, where, you know, people are facing some difficulties. And it's interesting because it you know, allows people to debate about issues that some of them are facing maybe in Pakistan, but also they see that there are other people facing similar issues in other places, and it allows a debate with parliamentarians, with government officials around these issues.
Great. And quite recently, there was also this event that was organized here in Islamabad called the Euro Village. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
You know, countries, usually diplomatic missions, they organize their national days, you know. And usually here in Islamabad, in any national days reception will end up in one of the two 5-star hotels you have here in Islamabad. Yeah. That is the usual setup. And it will gather the diplomats, the high-rank civil servants, a couple of politicians, I mean, the usual crowd. We decided actually 3 years ago that we wanted to do something different because we thought that for Europe Day, which is into bracket our national day, which is on the 9th of May, we wanted something different, something that we can go closer to the public of Pakistan.
That's nice. So,
we proposed that to our member states present here in Pakistan, different embassies, and everybody agreed with the idea. And so since 3 years, we are organizing, instead of this reception in one of the hotels, we are organizing this Euro Village, which is a kind of big, I wouldn't say party, but, you know, a place, a big gathering where each of our member states has a stall where they can display any information about their country, you know, such as culture, food, games, whatever they want. The EU, we also have our own stalls there, and it's open to everybody. And you have a bigger stand, you have a bigger stage where you have artists coming from the EU as well, Pakistani artists as well. So it's a big, it's a big party.
Excellent.
And it's this year, sorry, it was in PNCA as last year. And we had thousands of people, and I think we are very happy because we can feel that our, I would say, Pakistani from the street, you know, are learning about the EU, are learning about the EU member states, and it gets, you know, it's really people-to-people contacts, and it's what we were looking for, really, yeah.
So why is it important for the EU to have its own representation here in Pakistan when so many of its member states are already here?
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the European Union, obviously it's a very difficult beast to describe.
Yeah.
Because it's not really an international organization. It's more than an international organization. It's not a federation, it's less than a federation. So it's in between, and it's always difficult to classify the EU in political sense. But the EU is going more and more into an integration process. And since the new treaty of the European Union in 2009, we have now representations of the European Union in 142 countries. So it's a quite large diplomatic network we have. Each of these representation is headed by an ambassador, like me here in Pakistan, and then we have my staff. I have 60 here in Pakistan. I have 60 colleagues working with me, roughly. And what we do is we do exactly what member states' embassies are doing, but, and that is a big difference, but we don't deal with visas.
Okay,
so we don't deliver visas as European Union.
Yeah.
That is a full responsibility of our member states. What we do is we do represent the institution of the European Union, so the European Council, the gathering of the member states of the EU in Brussels. We represent the executive branch of the EU, which is called the European Commission. And we have also a role of coordination of our member states here in Pakistan in the frame of an agreed policy vis-à-vis Pakistan. Yeah. So my role as EU ambassador here is to gather my colleagues at least once a month, all my colleagues ambassadors, and to discuss with them, different issues related to Pakistan, and to see if our different policies are going well together to what we want to achieve with Pakistan. So that is that. And then I have my colleagues, as I said, who are working on trade and cooperation assistance, who are also having their own coordination with their counterparts in the different embassies. So currently the EU has 28 member states, and represented here in Pakistan we have 17 of them.
Okay. Yeah.
So altogether we have 18 with me.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's enough for business-related issues, and what I propose is that we go to my residence and then we can meet with my wife, Sonia.
Excellent.
She's waiting for us.
Okay, perfect. Time to take a short break. See you in a bit.
Bon, je vous présente Madame.
Most welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to your home.
Hello, thank you.
Okay, please have a seat.
Welcome back. We've just been welcomed here at the residence by Mrs. Sonia Kotan. So hello, Sonia.
Hello.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome.
So how has your experience been here in Pakistan? How do you like it here?
I mean, we both like Pakistan very much. It's our second stay in this country.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we were very pleased to hear that we were coming back 4 years ago.
Okay.
So we are still discovering the country.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, it's a huge country.
Yeah, exactly.
With many different landscapes and people and culture. So it has been so far a very good experience for me.
Yeah. So you were posted here before then?
We were actually more than once, actually twice. Yeah, we are there from 94 to 99, and 2001, 2002 as well. And in both stays, we were in Peshawar actually. Yeah, in real Pakistan.
Yeah. How would you compare your experience back then to right now? How has the country changed in your eyes?
It's a bit difficult for us to reply because at that time in Peshawar we were working for an aid agency.
Okay.
And we were working mostly for Afghan refugees, and also that was mostly what Sonia was doing.
Okay.
And I was working for Afghan refugees going back to Afghanistan. So I was mostly spending my time in Afghanistan. So it's clear that our stay in Peshawar was much focusing on Afghanistan rather than Pakistan. So it's a bit difficult for us to compare the two periods. We can compare obviously Peshawar. We were at that time we were there with our kids, and they spent their childhood actually in Peshawar, and they had a very, very good memory of their stay there. Yeah, no doubt. And we were coming to Islamabad mostly, you know, to deal with some administrative issues for our different organizations. So again, I mean, we were not so much focusing on Pakistan at that time. So for us, this day, I mean, for the last 4 years, is really where we are now getting, you know, much more close to Pakistan, discovering Pakistan, and traveling all around Pakistan, which we did not do in the 90s.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And what are you doing here these days? Are you, you mentioned that you were studying at the Quaid-e-Azam University, is that correct?
Yes, you know, for me, being now a diplomat's wife has not been easy because, as Jean-François said, I used to work a lot for aid agencies in different countries. So I try to find a way to connect to Pakistan outside, I would say, of the diplomatic circle, outside of the Islamabad bubble that we live in, which is a very comfortable bubble, but I like, you know, the connection with the citizens of Pakistan. So I decided to try to go back to university.
Great.
So I looked around, I wanted to select a public university, and finally I ended up in Quaid-e-Azam University doing a master on gender studies, which was a great experience for me, first to get out of my comfortable house and think and learn on gender issue in Pakistan with many young, very bright students coming from all over Pakistan, which is also the beauty of Quaid-e-Azam University, because they select students from all different provinces on quotas, so that was a great experience for me.
Yeah, excellent. And what else do you do in your free time, both of you? Do you get to go like hiking or any of the typical Islamabad things here?
Actually, we first of all, I think a position of EU ambassador is quite demanding here in Pakistan.
Yeah.
So I have to admit that I spent a lot of time working.
Yeah, so not a lot of free time.
And usually we try also, when I have to visit some programs going out of Islamabad, we try also to do that over weekends to save time to a certain extent. So I think over the last 4 years we have been traveling a lot in Pakistan. So what I would call our free time.
Yeah.
We have been, I wouldn't say everywhere, but I think we have been in places where probably not all diplomats are going. You know, from the south of Pakistan to the north, from the east to the west, including deep inside Balochistan, for example, or in Fatah. I mean, so all these kind of places as well.
Okay.
Because we have programs there, and because it's my duty as EU ambassador to also time to time to go there and to see how the European Union taxpayers' money is spent.
Yeah.
It's important for me that I can see with my own eyes, you know, how this money is spent. So we have been traveling quite a lot, and I think that was probably one of the best part of my work and of our stay here in Pakistan, to visit different places. I mean, we were, when was it, in early January, we were in Sindh, where we visited, you know, a number of places, and we drove from Karachi to Sakar, and passing by different districts, including Jamshoro, where there is also this shrine.
The Lal Shahbaz.
Yes,
Qalandar.
exactly, yes. Yeah,
What
so
did you see there?
we went there during this special time, which is Urs.
Urs,
Urs,
yeah.
So many people were there. It was, I mean, you could, you know, feel how the place was full of, I don't know, of spirituality. You know, it was very, very interesting to feel that, and to go into the shrine and to see the people, and so that was very good. On the same trip, we went to Mohenjo-Daro.
Oh, wow.
It was the second time that we went there. Went there already in December 2016. Also because we feel that it's a place which is full of history. part of Pakistan history now. And I think it's important for people like us also to connect with that and to understand where the people living here in Pakistan are coming from this Indus civilization, and how this Mohenjo-daro is one of the first cities in the humanity actually. So 4,000, 6,000 before Christus, something like that. So 4,000 people living there. It's quite amazing. Where in Europe at that time we didn't have this kind of situation. Far from that.
Exactly.
So it's very interesting to see that. So I mean, all these different aspects of Pakistan that you really get outside Islamabad. That's what I wanted to say. There was a say, which was Islamabad is 20 minutes far from Pakistan.
Yeah, exactly. From
so
Rawalpindi,
the time to go to Rawalpindi. So probably now it will be 45 minutes because it takes more time because of the traffic. But exactly that. I mean, you have to get out of Islamabad to try to grasp a little bit how Pakistan works. I mean, the people of Pakistan, the diversity of Pakistan.
So what would you say has been your favorite trip around the country for both of you?
Sonia?
It's a difficult question because it's really a fascinating place where you get different atmosphere everywhere.
Yeah.
But maybe a more recent one, when we went to Sindh lately, I was caught in meetings with number of women, and I could actually talk to them and reflect on our lives and compare which lives which are not easily comparable, me coming from Europe and them being from Sindh. But what I liked was the energy out of it and the way that they were, taking control over their lives. I'm not saying that they had no control before, but the way they were able to express it because they were in a group. And I think the energy coming out of a group of women in these circumstances is very powerful. So that was, very important for me, very inspiring. Because sometimes when I go and meet with people in Pakistan, I feel how privileged I am, coming over from Europe.
Yeah, exactly.
And all the institutions that we have that make our lives quite secure back in Europe. But on this particular day, I could feel that it's meaningful for me to go and talk and share experiences. I hope it's meaningful for them as much as it was for me on that day.
Great, wow. And what about for you, Mr. Ambassador?
I mean, many experiences, many trips which have been all great. I mean, we are lucky enough to went to the northern Pakistan, to Gilgit, and we were taken in a tour by helicopter all around the place. So that for 3 days. So that was just amazing because, I mean, when I was younger, I've been trekking a lot in Europe.
Yeah.
So I'm used, with mountains, but obviously. Even Alps in Europe cannot compare with northern Pakistan.
Yeah.
I mean, the size of the mountains, you feel that they are alive, actually, to a certain extent, because you have always traces of a rock, probably, which has fallen down the day before, and you can see it, and it's quite amazing place. But a particular trip also for me that I well remember is a trip I made from Quetta to a district in Balochistan called Jalmaxi.
Okay.
And this trip actually took me through the Bolan Pass. And the Bolan Pass is a very well-known pass in Pakistan because it's where, in the history of the subcontinent, all the people who have been invading the subcontinent coming from Central Asia and the western part. Have been coming either through the Khyber Pass in KPK or through the Bolan Pass in Balochistan. So it's a very interesting place to drive through. Yeah? Even if the country is a young country, 71 years old, you can feel how behind that you have all this culture, which is there, all this history of this part of the subcontinent. And on traveling from, even traveling from Quetta to Jalmaxi and after to Karachi, I mean, you are moving from Baluch tribes with their own culture, and then you are moving towards Sindh with their own culture, with Sufism, with, I mean, and you can see by driving how you are changing from you know, a culture to another culture. And that is very, very, very interesting here in Pakistan. Yeah. You don't find that in many countries.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so diverse.
I mean, if you look also at the landscape, I mean, you go from the beach of Karachi to the mountains of the K2 and others
exactly.
in northern Pakistan.
Different.
Yes. So that is really a blessing for Pakistan. Yeah, really.
So you have 2 children, right?
Yeah.
Have they visited you here in Pakistan ever?
I mean, as we said before, they lived in Pakistan.
Exactly, they
lived
they
in
lived
Pakistan
here,
in the 90s, yes. And both of them, yes, visited us, yes, for the last 4 years.
Okay.
Very keen. I mean, one of them was even went with us to Peshawar.
Back to the old hometown.
Exactly, yes. So he was very pleased, yes. And the other one is coming in a few days as well, so yeah.
Great.
So that will be
So they
good
still
for
like
him
to
as well.
come?
Yeah, sure, very much so, yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Great.
much so. And, you know, back home, time to time, you will see them wearing a shawal kameez just because they like it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
that's
like their second home, really,
Yeah.
because they grew up in Peshawar, they
Yes.
went to school in Peshawar, and Pakistan has been through many so different things over the past 20 years that they feel very connected to Pakistan, even if they have not lived there for. I mean, when we left, they were 8 and 6, something like that. But it's part of their lives, and they try to continue building relationship with Pakistan. They were very pleased to come back and visit us again several times, both of them. And the story is not ending there. I mean, I can see that they will keep coming back and trying to be for Pakistan very good PR in their, you know, lives wherever they will be living in Europe or somewhere else. Pakistan is very close to them, yeah. Of course, like for us, yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Okay, time to take a short break. See you in a bit. Welcome back. It's time to have some snacks. So how did you get in this line of work in the first place? You mentioned you have a PhD in veterinary sciences.
Yes,
yeah?
I do, yeah. It's a bit, I know,
That's quite
it's a
far.
bit bizarre, yeah. But no, actually, when I was a young vet, I was practicing as a vet. But at the same time, I helped in setting an aid agency, which is called in French Vétérinaires Sans Frontières, meaning Vets Without Borders, a little bit like, you know, Doctors Without Borders. So an organization which still exists actually, and which is providing technical assistance, veterinary technical assistance in third countries. So working with livestock owners, small landowners, I mean farmers. So I started like that. At one stage I had to decide between, because the organization grew up, and I had to choose between my practice and the organization. So I decided to quit my practice and to become a permanent staff of this organization.
Okay.
And from that, you know, I had one foot into the international cooperation world. And after my stay here in Pakistan, I was approached by the European Union to work with them. So I took an open competition because it's obviously something you have to do to become a civil servant of the EU. So I took an open competition, I passed it, and here I am.
Yeah. And how did you get into like aid work and working internationally?
I mean, the typical way I was working in Paris and getting limited in what I wanted to do, helping others, but at that time, you know, people were talking about going abroad and trying to do things for other countries. So I took my chance and I applied for an aid agency who at that time was working on the border between Thailand and Cambodia and helping the refugee population which was fleeing Cambodia just after the Khmer Rouge regime and taking refuge in Thailand. So I was posted there for 2 years and it really opened my eyes and changed my life completely. Yeah.
So what's the story behind this one here, this Kong
This
or
big
whatever
Kong,
it is?
Yeah. Actually, we had a trip in Thailand. When we were posted in Thailand, we went deep into Thailand countryside, a province called Isan.
Yeah, Isan. Yeah.
Isan. At the border with Laos.
Okay.
And on the way, we saw along the road actually many shops at one stage. I don't know, over what, 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers? Shops where we had plenty of these gongs. So now on the way back we stopped and we asked them and they explained to us that they were actually the main hub producing gongs for Thailand.
All the Buddhist temples of Thailand.
Yeah, it's used like,
Exactly,
is it used for meditation or something? Because
So
it
to
produces
call
this,
people and yes, to mark different times in the day. Yeah. Okay, you want to
Yeah,
listen?
let's hear it.
Very nice sound. Not too loud, but you know.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's this Southeast Asia coming to South Asia.
Yeah. That's quite impressive.
Yeah,
wow.
it's nice. Very nice.
Yeah, and now it follows you all
So
over
we
the world.
decided to stop in a shop and we asked them and we decided just to buy one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
that's
quite huge. How did you get it here?
Yeah. It's big,
Wow.
yes. Please, do you want to have some coffee? And
Alors, I
you.
would like to recommend this one.
Uh-huh.
Tell you a secret. You know, it's very difficult for an EU ambassador to attract other EU member states ambassadors to come every month to listen to me, to discuss with me in meetings. So my secret weapon is this one,
What is it?
which is a cake, a carrot cake.
I love carrot
And
cake.
the carrot cake is what is attracting my EU member state ambassadors to this residence
Wow.
every month. Otherwise, they don't come.
So then I must absolutely try it.
It's a good
Now I
one.
can see where they come.
You see why?
So do you have a Pakistani cook here working for you in the residence?
yes, of course, we have a very good cook.
Yeah.
I mean, someone here is
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah?
And we try to offer to our guests some international food, European food, but also some Pakistani food. So we do a mix, yeah, because we are in Pakistan. So I want to be able to offer different variety of food in the residence. I think it's important.
Yeah. Is the carrot cake his specialty then? Like, is
Yeah.
that like a French thing also?
No, not actually, no.
Yeah.
Not really, no. But we'll tell you another secret actually when it comes to food. Is with Sonia, we own a restaurant in France.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Wow.
in a small town in my province, in Burgundy. And I think what is great for us is that we can, compare what is cooked there. And there we are cooking only local food, what is produced locally by good producers. With also what is cooked by our cook here or what we are eating in the restaurants. So we have also this, this kind of approach. And what we see also is how you can mix cuisines.
Yeah.
So because back in Europe, in this restaurant, we have one of our cooks is somebody from Africa.
Oh, really?
He's from Eritrea and a refugee. and we can see how this gentleman has actually mastered, his knowledge of his own cuisine with the French one. So you can have a kind of fusion cuisine. So on that also, I think it's part of what you can find here also in Pakistan, in terms of, the diversity on how food is also related to relationship between people. At least when you are coming from Europe, or maybe when you are coming especially maybe from our country, from France, food is something very important. I think it's the case in many countries anyhow. But I see clearly we see that in Pakistan also is something very important for people. Yeah. As we said before, we have been traveling all over the place, and you can see how people from Lahore will say that they are cooking the best cuisine, whereas the people in Sindh will say no, it's us. So, and by the way, I think a very interesting aspect also in Pakistan is that we have found also in Thailand, we also found that in Cambodia, is that Pakistan is producing the best mangoes in the world.
Yeah.
And where you are in Thailand, Thai people will tell you they are producing the best mangoes in the world, as well as the Cambodian people as well.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, we can compare. We know that at least, yes, in Pakistan they are very good.
They are very good,
Especially the small one, I do not remember the name, but the small mangoes which are so good. Yes. So it's, so food is important, no doubt.
And have you found it difficult to adjust to the weather? Because this is very different, obviously, from Europe, especially in summer.
Me, not at all. I have no problem with that. What I've been facing in Pakistan is not so much the summertime, it's more the winter time.
Oh yeah. Because it gets very cold inside the houses.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that is an issue with how the modern houses in Pakistan are built, and I think it would be good that maybe for Pakistan to go back to more traditional, way of building. If we look at buildings 1 century ago, they had thick walls. It was clearly a bit different.
Yeah.
So we see that now maybe building is more going the easy way, so very thin walls, and then you put the AC.
Exactly.
So which is maybe not the best in terms of fighting climate change. So I think there is a work to do around the building techniques here in Pakistan.
Have you had a chance to see any of the local designers here? Because obviously in Paris, fashion is very important, and I think there's a lot of fashion designers here in Pakistan as well.
In Lahore, in Karachi, I'm always amazed by in Islamabad as well, but I think the main designers are Lahore or Karachi based. I'm always amazed by the quality of what they produced. I think there should be a market back in Europe, because the quality of clothes, the quality of design is outstanding. Yeah, and it's, as I said, it's very comfortable. So
exactly,
I would advise all my friends back in Europe to wear them.
Yeah, especially in summer. It's I don't even think about wearing Western clothes here.
Yeah, it's probably where before when we were in my office, we were referring to GSP Plus on the fact that, as for me, Pakistan is not fully utilizing GSP Plus, not exploring new avenues in terms of export. And I think when it comes to textile, I think Pakistan is still too shy in terms of producing what Pakistan knows to produce, but not exploring, for example, upper end in terms of clothes. You have only a few factories here in Pakistan who are working at high level in terms of what they produce. Yeah. Usually it's more the middle or low level of clothes which are exported to the EU. So I think it will be good to explore also more and more this high upper end level of clothes in Pakistan. I think so, because there is a potential. There is very good designers, very good fabrics. So that should be a potential for Pakistan as well.
Yeah. So, Mr. Ambassador, you have mentioned that you are expecting more Europeans to come to Pakistan now, especially for business and maybe also for tourism. Could you tell me why you think?
We see a renewed interest by some investors from Europe now to looking at this untapped market actually. You know, it's a market of 210 million inhabitants, so where investment is still lacking, so there is an interest there. So I guess we see some positive signals by a number of investors from Europe. I guess also what the new government has been saying over the last 9 months in terms of trying to attract investors, I think has been also well received. But now also investors, they want to see that it will be really implemented. They want to see, you know, results on how they can come here, how the legal aspects, the judicial aspect, they can work in a secure environment. So people are, I think they are now testing the water. I think you can see more and more investors showing up and testing the water to see if it's right time to come. So I hope it is the case, and there will be more and more coming. Obviously, as soon as some of them will really start big business in Pakistan, then the others will follow. So I think we are on this trend now, which is positive for Pakistan.
Great. Okay, so now we've reached the part of the program where I always ask my guests to write in our visitors book. So here we go. Let me just open it. And you can just write your comments and your names.
Okay.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's see what you wrote.
Please.
It was great to be interviewed by the Visitors Book of Indus News, an opportunity for Sonia and I to remember the great moments we have had in Pakistan over the many years we have spent in the country. Thank you for the interview. EU-Pakistan Dosti Zindabad. Great. So, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A great pleasure.
Thank you. That's it for today. Please join me again next week. Goodbye.